Autism symptoms. Specifically, what are my autism symptoms? Hi, I'm Brett, the AuDHD Boss, ADHD and autism, and specifically what I do on this channel is I talk about ADHD and autism in the workplace. I take a strengths-based approach to how we can survive in the workplace with our autism and ADHD. On this video, I'm going to talk specifically about my autism symptoms and how I found my way into autism and ADHD as a late diagnosed adult. To do so, I'm going through this notebook, a notebook that I started before, during, and after I was going through my autism diagnosis. As I was going through these pages, getting to this point, I was reading back on all these many things from about 2019 to 2020, about all the different ways that I was struggling, frustrations I was having, both creatively, both in my career. And as I look back at these pages now, I realize how much the autism and ADHD symptoms and struggles and anxieties were leaping off the page to me. But I didn't have the education, and I didn't know, and I didn't understand. I do on this side of it, many years later, having really spent a lot of time monotropism, special interests around better understanding ADHD and autism, I can now see it. I'm going to start with the very first symptom that made it such an aha moment for me: masking. Masking shows up in ADHD and autism, but in particular for me, when I discovered what masking was in the world of autism and ADHD, that was my holy crap moment. I mask all the time. I also just want to stick a little footnote here that I really didn't see my autism and ADHD symptoms until I started to specifically look for the symptoms around how ADHD in women. When I saw the symptoms for ADHD in women, that's when I suddenly discovered, oh wow, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. And that was kind of a big moment. And masking was at the top of that. Masking is very much hiding, masking, keeping that reserved look to you, keeping that, not really sharing every inner thought, not really necessarily expressing all those different things. Masking is trying to like contain it all, regardless of the situation that you're in, where you're trying to hold your composure. You're not necessarily sharing everything that's bothering you, the anxieties, all these different things. It's like just keeping a mask on and not letting it show. You're trying to show up in a way where you can fit in. You're trying to show up in a way where you can fit into the different pieces. We also call this chameleon, where we're showing up inside all these different scenes and scenarios. So a lot of times I would try to, when I was a child, as I grew up, as I became an adult, I would try to fit in or find my way in, fit into different situations. I would adapt to different scenarios, different situations, different social environments, different social moments, work situations. I often would start kind of quiet and reserved, and I still do this, where I sort of read the room, get a sense for what's happening in the room. I get a sense of the energy in the room. I get a sense of like what's happening. And then slowly, as I process and track and I understand the different scenarios and the different personalities, I then will start to adapt myself, my personality, how I show up in that space. I will mask many, many parts of myself. I will hide many parts of myself, but then I will mask myself to how I can show up and be in that room, in that situation. That was a huge thing. When I learned about that, how high I masked when I did the masking test, that was a huge aha moment for me in understanding my ADHD and autism. A couple of smaller things, definitely struggles with change. I really struggle with change. I am a big fan of the phrase manage expectations. In particular, I need my expectations managed. And so in the process, I try to help other people manage their expectations, where I can kind of gradually get to that point where I'm comfortable with that thing, that idea, that specific thing. And then once I'm there, I can kind of get comfortable with that change, but it often takes me a while to get there. A lot of times change can be very overwhelming. You know, one thing that happens with me is I can process a lot of stimuli, a lot of information, a lot of things that all happen that I can take in all at once. That can be really overwhelming, especially when there's change in the air and there's a lot of change all happening at once. Struggling to follow instructions due to implied meaning and non-literal instructions. That was a big thing. Still to this day, I cannot do math word problems. A standardized test of any kind, I would immediately fail it. But if the questions had too much nuance and I could see too many ways in or too many answers or too many questions, I would ask a lot of questions. I would be desperate in need of context. Taking things literally. Now, I'm better now about this as an adult, but I really do still struggle with sarcasm. I also struggle if someone's flirting with me. Not that that happens a lot these days. I often can't tell the difference between when someone's being real and when someone's sort of dropping a hint. Sometimes I really need things very explicit, especially at work. I need things to be direct. I need things to be very clear in terms of the instructions. Being fixed on a structure or routine. That's another thing that I didn't realize how badly I would latch onto structures and routines. Now, this is where my autism and my ADHD sort of take two separate paths. My autism very much wants structure, very much wants routine. My ADHD will sometimes resent that structure, will resent that routine. Struggles to understand social rules. Again, I'm better at this now that I'm in my 40s, but when I was younger, very much didn't understand social rules. I would ask a lot of questions. A lot of times, this is a big thing that comes up in the autism symptoms, is feeling like an alien, trying to figure out how to be human. And I would bring it up in early years of therapy before I understood ADHD and autism, constantly asking, why do we do this? Why do we act that way? Why do we respond that way? Why this? Why this? Why this? But here's where the masking comes in. As soon as I started to adapt and learn and look at pattern recognition and learn these scripts, these social scripts, these nuances around how humans do these different things and why we do them this way, I'm able to then feed that into how I mask, use social scripts, have cues in my head. Okay, you hear this, respond this way. You hear this, you do that. Those all became a part of the performance in terms of how I would mask and then how I would use scripts. Oftentimes because of this, I would be told I'm very polite or I'm very well behaved. Well, a lot of that's because I've figured out how to do social scripts. I've learned how to focus on these small details, these small phrases. I listen for things. And if I would hear a sentence or phrase that I didn't quite know how to understand, or somebody went off of those scripts or those things, I would struggle with that, especially if I was in like a new environment, trying to understand the atmosphere, the dynamic with people. Sensory issues. I do have a lot of sensory issues. I'm very particular about clothing, smells, different things like that. I hear things a different way. If I hear too much noise in a room, I can't concentrate. If it's, if there's different sounds, if there's a sound effect or something going on, strobes different, lighting in particular is unique. This sort of warm lighting is very unique to me. I need this kind of lighting. If it's too much of an overhead type lighting or it's just too sterile, I lose my mind. I absolutely can't do it. Struggling with non-verbal communications and struggles with gestures. That's a big one for me. I can't quite explain most of that, but I have a hard time picking up on the non-verbal communication things, and that came up in my autism assessment as well. Anxiety and depression. I finally found an autistic ADHD focused therapist who explained to me that the reason why I struggled with previous therapy before I understood my ADHD and autism is they would constantly try to treat the anxiety. The difference, though, is that the anxiety comes from having ADHD and autism. And if we don't work through the struggles of ADHD and autism, I'll never be able to get a handle on the anxiety. And that's a very specific way to treat where I need help in terms of my ADHD, autism, and anxiety. Hyperfixations. I can get really hyperfixated on a lot of different things. I'm not going to say a lot about this particular one, but I think if you understand hyperfixations or you need to learn more about it, go to Neurodivergent Insights or go to Embrace Autism to understand more about that. Executive function. I've got an entire video breaking down a lot of different things about executive function, but for me in particular, executive function can show up in my ADHD. It can also show up in my autism. I would again check out How to ADHD, who does an exceptional job on explaining executive function. But then here's the thing that we often don't talk enough about. There's executive function and then there's executive dysfunction. Executive function really identifies the areas that we struggle with, things like time management, meeting deadlines, different things like that. Executive dysfunction is all the different ways that that then impacts you. And the two things go together and they're worth reading up on both. Stimming. I didn't realize how badly I need to have a good stim. And this is my favorite stim. Again, I've got a couple of videos about stimming, but I also have another stim toy here that I'm a big fan of, this kind of stuff. I love these. I like a good, right there, yeah. Sometimes if I'm nervous or I'm in a meeting and I'm bored, I'll grab this if I'm not quite sure what to do or what to say. I grab this kind of stuff. Often interrupts people. This is a particularly hard one for me, or it was at work. I'm now hyper aware of it and I pay more attention to it. And so now that I'm tuned into it, I hear myself eager to interrupt people, and now I tell myself to stop, or I write it down, or I type it up, or I hold that thought until it's appropriate time for me to read or say or do that thing. And now I also pay more attention to the social cues now that I've learned. Look for the moment to speak, or look for an invitation to speak, or look for a way in as opposed to interrupting people. But for me, a lot of times it's getting a burst of ideas, maybe my 5 or 6 ideas at once, and eager to like share that, say it, like get it out there so everybody knows. But also the anxiety of losing that thought, losing that idea, losing that creativity, and not having the opportunity to say that very important, vital thing, or at least I think it is at that time, to get that thought out. Hyperempathy. I've got a whole video dedicated to hyperempathy, in particular how hyperempathy impacts me at work and among my coworkers and colleagues and things like that. But in particular, empathy is one of those things that often is a misknown or misunderstood or myth around autistic individuals about. Some will believe we don't have any empathy, when in fact, many of us have hyperempathy or can be attuned, empathy tuners to this. So go check that one out if you want to know more about empathy. Emotional regulation. Now this is really big across ADHD and autism, and it just difficulty in managing your emotional regulation. I would check out, again, Neurodivergent Insights, How to ADHD or Embrace Autism, more about emotional regulation or emotional dysregulation. Auditory processing. This is a delay in listening. Like I hear it or I know I've heard it, and then possibly it takes a few beats for me to process that thing, understand what's been said, or maybe I hear it as noise, or I hear it as like just a sound, but it doesn't quite translate as well. There's like a delay in hearing it. There's a delay in that processing and understanding. That's a big one for me. It often gets me in trouble with a lot of my friends and relationships where people think, well, have you said something? Why aren't you responding? I said that thing, but I don't hear it quite at first. Like I hear it and then it takes me a beat to say it, and then when they say it again, then I hear it. Eye contact. Eye contact is one of those things that I've had to train myself and force myself to do. I'm still not great at it. I'm actually better when I'm filming a video because I know what to do. I know I need to look at the camera. I know I need to look at the monitor of myself, but eye contact can still be a particularly hard one. Remember to look at somebody, or how long or how less. I do the math in my head about how long I should be doing eye contact versus how long I shouldn't. It's okay, you've been looking at this person too long now, look away, do this, do that. So eye contact's a big one. Sometimes processing itself, processing new information, sometimes it takes me days, weeks, months. Sometimes I need to verbally process with somebody. Verbal processing, doing verbal processing tours are a big one for me, where I need to sit down with close friends or confidants and like process something out loud. A big part of the therapy that I do with my therapist is I'm just processing things out loud, and it takes that verbal processing to get that information processed and get it out. Now, it's tricky to know who you can do that with, when you should do it, when it's safe. Doing this at work with emails and different colleagues, you have to choose the right audience to do it. If you need to make a decision or do something with your boss, it's not always the best choice to do verbal processing with somebody who just needs you to make a decision, or doesn't need to hear all that stuff. Certainly if you're in a staff meeting or something like that, verbal processing is not the time to do that. So you want to think about, where do I need to be verbal processing? And you want to be aware of it too. I've got trusted colleagues that I'll call and say, hey, can I just verbal process something with you? Can I just kind of unload on that thing? And that makes a huge difference. And it helps me understand things. By the time I get to the end of it, I hit my aha moment, or I hit that moment where I'm like, oh, that's what it was, but I need to do the verbal processing. I got to get it out of my system. I've got to get it out. And sometimes if I'm depressed or anxious or upset about something, I literally have to just expel it from my system through verbal processing in order to just move forward on that thing. Task initiation was a really big one for me, having trouble getting started, having trouble to do a lot of different things. That again shows up a lot for my ADHD. Having a lot of weird rules, having a lot of very specific rules that other people don't understand or don't follow, but only you know, or only specifically you understand, or maybe other neurodivergent people also understand with you. That's a big one. I had a lot of those. Struggling with new systems, that's in particular very hard for me. New systems, new workflows. Needing to have things explained verbally and then follow-ups in writing. I love explanations. I love hearing it and having the details and all the different things. I like being able to ask a lot of questions to understand how different systems and different this. I like to get into intricate details about these things. Oftentimes I struggle with instructions, in particular if I don't understand the thing, or with my ADHD, I need to know the reason why we're doing something. I need to see the big picture of everything, and then I need to be able to zoom into the intricate details of different things. And of course, the biggest one for me, of course, is rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, RSD. That's a big one in particular with ADHD, but it does show up in a lot of different places of neurodivergence. I won't get into the details of RSD now, rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, but I do encourage strongly
reading up on it from How to Eat ADHD, watching their videos, reading Embrace Autism or Neurodivergent Insights for more on that.
Okay, so this is just a small sample of the many autism and ADHD symptoms that I noticed. These are in particular the things that I discovered when I was going through my diagnosis journey. There are many, many more, many things, and I strongly recommend Embrace Autism, How to ADHD, and Neurodivergent Insights as the first places to start if you want to learn more about yourself. Over at Embrace Autism, you can take a lot of different tests for ADHD and autism, and you can learn more about these tests for free right on their website. It's a great place to do a lot of first place or learning more about different symptoms and how it might show up for you. And if you'd like to know how my autism and ADHD assessment went, I've got a whole other video that walks through every part of the entire process for how I got my autism assessment and all the different steps and all the different ways that it showed up for me and what I wasn't expecting and what I was expecting. Thanks for watching. I hope this video was helpful. I hope some of the things that I talked about in this video today were helpful for you. If you in particular are looking for any advice or how to better understand how to do something in the workplace with your ADHD and autism, or you have a particular problem or scenario or situation that you want to know more about, ask me in the comments below, shoot me an email, find all the different ways on social to reach out to me and let me know, and I'd be happy to make a video specifically about those topics. Thanks very much. I hope this video has been helpful. Please like and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. And check out some of the other videos on the channel while you're here. Thanks for watching.